Close your eyes and journey to a distant past. Imagine a world where giant storks the size of humans hunted, where elephant-like creatures were no bigger than a cow, and most bizarrely, a world inhabited by people the size of children. Would you believe that a world seemingly plucked from a science fiction movie could have once been as real as our own? Who were these people, and what happened to them? This is the story of Homo Floresiensis, perhaps the most unique of all human species, who were only half the size of modern humans and their fascinating world. Now, lean back, because by the end of this video, when you learn whether this lost civilization was the hunter or the hunted, how they faced down giant dragons, and what became of them, your perspective on human history might change forever. Before we begin, we want to remind you that you can click the Join button to take advantage of the special benefits of our channel and support us directly by tapping the 3 dots below the video and using the Thanks button. Also, to help us continue these mysterious journeys, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the video. It all began in September 2003 in the Liang cave, a massive limestone cavern hidden beneath the lush vegetation of Flores Island, Indonesia. The air inside the cave was cool and damp, a stark contrast to the tropical heat outside. The sound of water dripping from the ceiling broke the silence of millennia. An international team of Australian and Indonesian archaeologists was searching for evidence of our ancestors' epic migration from Asia to Australia. The light from their headlamps danced in the darkness, illuminating the ancient formations on the cave walls. After days of meticulous work, the tip of an archaeologist's brush touched something hard. It wasn't soil, it was bone. First, a small, curved piece, then another. As the excavation deepened, a skull slowly emerged, but this skull was strangely small. The team initially thought it belonged to an unfortunate child. However, as more bones were uncovered, the story changed. Worn adult teeth, fused bone plates. It was clear that this was not a child. It was a fully grown adult, but incredibly tiny. When a nearly complete skeleton was revealed, the whispers in the cave were replaced by an awe-filled silence. This skeleton was given a code name, LB1. Further excavations in 2004 revealed 7 more skeletons, proving that LB1 was not an anomaly. A whole population had lived here. The initial dating of these mysterious beings sent a shockwave through the scientific community. It was thought they could have lived as recently as 13,000 years ago. This meant that while modern humans had spread across the globe for thousands of years after the pyramids were built, another human species was still breathing on this isolated island. The very idea was revolutionary. However, the bones themselves were a challenge. After thousands of years in the cave's damp, acidic soil, they were not fossilized but had almost rotted away. Archaeologists described their consistency as wet blotting paper. They were so fragile that they could crumble at a touch. Each piece had to be painstakingly hardened with special chemicals for weeks before it could be removed from the earth. This delicate process made piecing together the story of the 30-year-old woman they nicknamed Flo even more difficult. Years later, more advanced geological analyses revealed that the initial dating was a mistake. A massive rockfall from the cave ceiling or a flood thousands of years ago had mixed the soil layers, scrambling the chronological order. A new, more accurate dating placed the age of the Homo Floresiensis skeletons at between 100,000 and 60,000 years ago, with their stone tools dating back as far as 190,000 years. This made the story even more mysterious. These small people had ruled this island alone for tens, if not hundreds, of thousands of years. But could we solve their secrets more deeply? The greatest hope was DNA. DNA could tell us about their relationship to us, their skin and eye color, everything. But 2 separate attempts in 2006 ended in disappointment. Flores's tropical climate was the greatest enemy of genetic material. The heat and humidity had rendered the delicate DNA strands unrecognizable over thousands of years. Without DNA, the questions of who they were, where they came from, and how closely they were related to us would be left to the silent testimony of bones and stones. And this testimony would spark a fierce scientific debate that has lasted for decades. The discovery of Homo Floresiensis fundamentally shook everything we thought we knew about what it means to be human. On one hand, the discoverers were convinced that the evidence pointed to a completely new human species. On the other, skeptical voices from laboratories around the world questioned, could this just be a sick, isolated group of Homo sapiens with a developmental disorder like microcephaly? But the evidence did not support the pathology theory. At the heart of the debate was their unique anatomy. Studies in 2007 showed that their wrist bones were completely different from those of modern humans. Our flexible and versatile wrists allow us to make complex tools and manipulate objects with precision. Their wrists, however, resembled those of our 3-million-year-old ancestors, the Australopiths. This simpler, more primitive structure suggested they grasped the world in a different way and used their tools with a different grip. Yet, with these primitive wrists, they made surprisingly complex tools, deepening the mystery. Their feet were equally strange. They were unusually long and flat-footed in proportion to their bodies. The arches in our feet act like springs, storing and releasing energy for long-distance walking and running. Their flat feet lacked this feature. This anatomy suggested that they couldn't run long distances, but instead moved through the dense forest undergrowth with a unique, high-stepping gait. So, where did these unique people originate? Two main theories emerged. The first was that their ancestors split from Africa very early, perhaps as a primitive species like Homo habilis, and evolved in complete isolation from the rest of the world. This would make them a very ancient, forgotten, and lost branch of the human family tree. The second, and increasingly stronger theory, was that they were descendants of our wandering ancestor who had spread to Asia, Homo erectus. According to this theory, a group of Homo erectus somehow reached Flores Island 1 million years ago, and after remaining isolated for thousands of years, underwent a dramatic transformation. The biggest evidence supporting this theory was the discovery of a 700,000-year-old jawbone and teeth found elsewhere on the island in 2016. These remains were even smaller than those of Flo and her people. This discovery almost confirmed the idea that the dwarfing process on the island had begun much earlier, and that Homo Floresiensis descended from Homo erectus. These little people were the descendants of a once magnificent traveler who had shrunk into a completely different form to survive in the challenging and limited conditions of an island. The answer to how a group of Homo erectus could shrink to half their size lies in a powerful evolutionary mechanism called island dwarfism. This is nature's law of resource management. On the mainland, resources are abundant, and a large body provides an advantage against predators and in competition. But on an island, resources are limited, and large predators are often absent. Here, a large body is no longer an advantage. On the contrary, it's a metabolic burden that needs to be fed. In these conditions, evolution rewards smaller, less energy-consuming, and more efficient bodies. The pygmy Stegodon elephants on Flores were also a product of the same process. Their colossal ancestors, who once reached the island, had shrunk over generations into creatures the size of a pony that a hobbit could ride. The body of Homo Floresiensis was a perfect example of this process. With an average height of 1.06 meters and a weight of 25 kilograms, these people must have moved like shadows in the forests of Flores. The world looked very different from their perspective, a realm full of both dangers and opportunities, perceived from just 1 meter above the ground, among giant trees, mushrooms, and plants. But the biggest shock and scientific paradox lay within the skull. Their brains had a volume of only 380 cubic centimeters. This is the same size as a chimpanzee's brain and only one-third the size of a modern human's brain. For the scientific community, which had for years operated on the equation of large brain equals high intelligence, this was a revolution. Because these small-brained people exhibited incredibly complex and intelligent behaviors, there was clear evidence of controlled use of fire in their caves. These were not just randomly burned branches, but consciously lit hearths that were maintained for generations. Fire provided them with warmth, protection, and most importantly, cooked food. Cooking makes nutrients easier to digest and provides more energy, a critical step for brain development. In addition, tens of thousands of stone tools were found. These were not just simple cutters, but carefully shaped knives, awls, and scrapers for specific purposes. They used these tools to hunt and butcher the island's largest animal, the pygmy stegodons. This organized hunting required strategic thinking, complex planning, and the passing of this knowledge from generation to generation. This proved that the organization and efficiency of the brain's internal structures were just as important as its absolute size. Perhaps their brains were smaller, but their neural pathways were incredibly optimized. Unnecessary connections were pruned, and regions critical for survival, tool-making, social cooperation, and environmental awareness were intensified. They were living, breathing proof of how evolution can shape intelligence in vastly different and unexpected ways. Imagine stepping onto Flores Island 50,000 years ago. This was a world unlike anything you've ever known, both magical and deadly. The sounds from the forest depths were much different from the sounds of the modern world. The intoxicating scent of tropical flowers was mixed with a constant sense of danger in the air. The first threat came silently from the sky. The giant stork, Leptotylos robustus, standing about 1.8 meters tall, was the winged ruler of the island. This was not just a big bird. It was an intelligent and patient predator with a massive spear-like beak. It could stand motionless on a tree branch like a statue for hours, watching for the slightest movement below. When its shadow fell on the forest floor, every small creature took cover. For the particularly vulnerable Homo Floresiensis children, this bird was a nightmare from the sky. A moment's inattention could end with a lightning-fast strike from its This world was a brutal yet balanced ecosystem where the hunter and the hunted constantly switched roles, and every day was a test of survival. Homo Floresiensis managed to be an integral part of this system for hundreds of thousands of years, until new and different types of boats, ones the island had never witnessed before, appeared on the horizon. Around 50,000 years ago, the millennia-old ecological balance of Flores Island changed forever. A type of boat they had never seen before appeared on the horizon. The people who disembarked looked very similar to them, but were very different. Taller, stronger, more organized, and more numerous. Homo sapiens. It was us. How the end came is a complete mystery, and we will probably never know for sure. Perhaps there was a bloody and brutal conflict. It is a painful but possible scenario that our ancestors saw these little people who were different from them as a threat, a rival, or perhaps just a type of animal, and exterminated them. Sadly, human history is full of dark examples of such encounters. However, extinction does not always come with swords and spears. Often it works more silently, slowly, and insidiously. The most likely possibility is ecological competition. We may have consumed the island's resources much faster and more efficiently with our more advanced hunting techniques, perhaps with ranged weapons like the bow and arrow. The pygmy Stegodon herds, on which Homo Floresiensis depended for survival, may have been wiped out quickly by new and more deadly hunters. For them, this meant the fundamental collapse of the food chain and a slow and inevitable starvation. Perhaps the Hobbits went out to hunt one day and found that their traditional hunting grounds were empty and that the strange, tall hunters had taken the place of the Stegodons. Another possibility is an invisible killer: disease. Having lived on an isolated island for hundreds of thousands of years, the Hobbits' immune systems could have been completely defenseless against microbes from the mainland. A simple flu virus or a bacterium that our ancestors carried, of which they were not even aware, could have turned into an unstoppable, deadly epidemic for the Hobbit population. Whatever the reason, the result was certain. Shortly after our arrival on the island, Homo Floresiensis was erased from the stage of history. Along with them, the giant storks and pygmy stegodons also disappeared. That unique and strange world of Flores melted away into our world. Their extinction was not just the end of a species, it was also the end of a completely different way of being human, of a millions of years long experiment in evolution. With their loss, we also lost a potential answer to what it means to be human. Our path was not the only path. Their silence is perhaps the echoing cost of our overwhelming success on this planet. We hope this journey was impressive for you. You can support us by subscribing to the channel and liking the video. See you in the shadows of the past.